Environmental pressures on orcas. In this presentation, I will go over the pod structure and social dynamics of orcas and the specific environmental pressures faced by orcas, which include dams, food competition, plastic pollution, noise pollution, and the aquarium trade. This list is not exhaustive. These are merely some of the largest threats that orcas are facing today. Environmental pressures on orcas. In this presentation, I will go over the pod structure and social dynamics of orcas and the specific environmental pressures faced by orcas, which include dams, food competition, plastic pollution, noise pollution, and the aquarium trade. This list is not exhaustive. These are merely some of the largest threats that orcas are facing today. Pod structures and social dynamics. Before diving into the environmental pressures faced by orcas, it is important to contextualize the pod structures and social dynamics of these creatures so that these pressures can be better understood. Orcas hunt and socialize in pods, which are family groups made up of around 40 individuals. However, they can be as small as 5 individuals. A superpod is a group of related pods. An example of this is the southern resident killer whale population, which is comprised of the J, K, and L pods. These superpods and/or populations can be either transient or resident. More broadly, orcas can be divided into ecotypes. There are several ecotypes in the northern and southern hemispheres that are genetically distinct from one another. These ecotypes do not appear to breed with or interact with other ecotypes. All pods, therefore, are made up by a single ecotype. The pods themselves are matriarchal in nature. These matriarchs, who can live longer than 90 years, are responsible for moving the pods to find salmon and other food sources. They are usually the oldest female members of the pod. Orcas are highly intelligent, with each pod having a different dialect. Pods are very close-knit family units, with several generations of orcas living within the same pod concurrently. Food is often shared around the pod, usually between mothers and calves, but also with other family members as well. Orcas have also been observed mourning the loss of their relatives and calves. For example, Taliqua, a mother from the J-pod of the South resident killer whales, was observed carrying her deceased calf for 17 days. Environmental pressures on orcas. Dams. Dams impact the food chains that many orcas rely on, especially those that survive principally on salmon. When dams are constructed, they change river speed and restrict access to different parts of the river. This prevents salmon from accessing natural spawning grounds they need to produce their young. Without these spawning grounds, salmon must find new areas to leave their eggs or they will not be able to reproduce. This is detrimental to orcas who rely on salmon for food. Orcas are large organisms, some weighing around 6 tons and ranging from 23 to 32 feet long. These creatures require a very large caloric intake, roughly 200,000 to nearly 300,000 calories per day. They survive by hunting large groups of salmon to meet their energy needs. Some orcas, like the south resident killer whale population, hunt only Chinook salmon, a large and threatened type of salmon. Smaller salmon are often not worth hunting as the energy expended to hunt them is greater than the energy the fish would provide. Dams limit the number of salmon that are able to spawn, leading to smaller populations and schools for orcas to hunt. In order to restore salmon runs in the areas orcas inhabit, natural spawning grounds must be restored. This involves preventing new dam construction in spawning areas and deconstructing existing dams so that natural water flows can be restored and more areas of the river can be accessed. While these aren't the only solutions to the issues caused by dams, they are the most effective. Solutions like fisheries have proven to be lackluster as they have been unable to recover the largest sized fish that orcas rely on. Food competition. The population of salmon, such as the Chinook salmon, is also being reduced by fishing. It is often thought that harvesting the largest and oldest fish helps ensure the population of fish will be able to replenish itself. However, harvesting the largest fish in a population results in the dominance of small, slow-growing fish. Modern fishing practices are unsustainable as the fish are over-harvested and fisheries are unable to produce organisms large enough as mentioned prior. This is very problematic for orcas who must hunt for the largest organisms in a population in order for the hunt to be sustainable. Chinook salmon are also under threat. On the west coast, 2 populations are listed as endangered and 7 are considered threatened. Chinook salmon are also called king salmon and are sought after by consumers and fishermen. Since populations of Chinook salmon and salmon in general have smaller organisms on average, orcas are gaining less net energy from hunts. The smaller population sizes are also a significant factor. Dead orcas have been observed by scientists often have what is called peanut brain, which is a deficiency of fat around the skull of the orca. This is a symptom of malnutrition as orcas are forced to burn all their fat content. There are several practices and policies that can be put into place to sustain the Chinook populations. Tighter fishing restrictions would help the populations recover to a much greater level than current restrictions. There are several examples of ecosystem collapse resulting from fishing restrictions that were lifted too soon or were too loose. A way that the average consumer could help is to avoid purchasing king salmon or Chinook salmon. This will help shift the market to other populations that are more stable and aren't eaten by orcas. Fish farms have also been proposed as a solution. While fish farms would reduce wild competition, it is important to consider other environmental consequences of fisheries. Plastic pollution. As more plastic is dumped into the ocean, more plastic ends up in the bodies of the fish that consume it. Salmon are no exception. When salmon consume plastic, their stomachs fill and they don't eat real food. This deprives the fish of necessary nutrition. It also deprives the orcas who eat them of nutrition. More and more plastic accumulates in the bodies of orcas as they consume plastic-containing fish. This is known as bioaccumulation. Consuming plastics can also cause illness and other health problems in many sea creatures. A solution to this problem is to reduce plastic usage, even if you reside in a landlocked area. Plastics can enter the sea through rivers and winds. Stricter plastic dumping policies are also needed and are arguably the most effective solution as it targets large polluters. Consumers can also try to avoid companies that use excessive plastic or are known to dump irresponsibly. Noise pollution. Boat traffic, seismic arrays, and other modern equipment have caused a steady increase in underwater noise each year. This can affect the ability to communicate and the behavior of orcas. Often frequencies produced by ship noises overlap with those used by orcas. Orcas rely on echolocation for hunting. When there is a large amount of vessel noises, orcas cannot hear the return clicks from echolocation as well. Studies have also linked underwater noises to stress hormones in whales and orcas. When orcas are closer to ships producing these frequencies, they are less successful in hunting and are less likely to eat due to stress caused by the noise. Noise stress also causes changes in the socialization of orcas. To solve this problem, boat traffic should be reduced to a minimum, and boat traffic should be routed away from resident pods and the transient pod paths. Aquarium trade. Though the capturing of orcas has mostly stopped in the US, these practices still continue around the world. Orcas typically don't survive long in captivity, and calves born in captivity are far more likely to die. These conditions in which orcas live that are captive are often cruel. The tanks are much smaller than their native ranges, and they are separated from their family members. Orcas are very social creatures and do poorly when isolated. Only a few orcas can fit into these small tanks, which limits the amount of other organisms they can be housed with. There are a long list of orcas who live in captivity in these conditions. 33 orcas are still held captive in the United States alone. A solution to this problem is to enact stricter international standards regarding the capturing of wild orcas. Policy also needs to be enacted to ban the capturing and display of orcas in the U.S. Measures need to be taken to ensure that orcas are thoughtfully reintroduced into the wild, such as being returned to their original pods and families. Thank you for viewing this presentation. I hope that we as a society do better to ensure the survival of all species, including orcas.